I mean, Swahili. Swahili is the most spoken language in Africa. And
Hmm.
I read an article where they said if Africa had to become one, obviously we would need a common language that we will all be able to relate to. So,
Okay.
do you think us having one common indigenous language would be practical for us, especially when you're trying to acknowledge it in our schools, university, on that global world stage?
I don't think that it would be practical because your indigenous language is your identity. So if we decide on the Swahili language as the umbrella language for Africa, where's my identity as a Shona person? Where's my identity as a Xhosa person? Where's my identity as a Venda person?
Mm,
So again, it's just replacing a Western language with another language, whereas I think the core idea behind indigenous languages is my identity has to be seen, because right now we don't see our indigenous identities because we've decided that English is the medium of communication.
instruction, yeah. And then, I mean, we speak of decolonization of the education curricula. And would us having our indigenous languages as a medium of instruction be beneficial to us?
I definitely believe that. And I think if you look at South African history, this has been something that children actually died for.
Mm,
The importance of my indigenous language. Remember, June the 16th,
mm,
um, that day, the Soweto uprising,
mm,
they rose up and said, I want to be taught in my own language. I do not want to be taught in another language. I want to be taught in my own language. And
mm,
they died for it. That there's no higher sacrifice than that, dying for your own language. So already South African history shows us that, where the younger generation said, my identity, my culture, it has to come into my education. And even now, it has to come into our education because you find English is usually taught as a home language. And then you have the other languages. If we have a second language, it's given a lower status where now it's a first additional language or it's a second additional language.
mm,
And already you are taking away the importance of that language by lowering its standards, where you say the exam will be easier and we'll take out those challenging aspects. You're taking away the importance of the language. Whatever language that is taught at a school, I believe they should have the same level, the same standard. The same things that are taught in English should be the same things that are taught in any other indigenous language that is at a school.
no, that's very true. And then, I mean, the concept of lost in translation means when something's translated into another language and sometimes translated back into the original language, and because of the differences of the languages, some of the original meaning is lost. So, what is the link then between language and knowledge?
For you to have knowledge, you have to use language. You express your knowledge through language. You express it verbally. You express it the written word. So knowledge is up here. How does it come out to be heard by others? There has to be a way you transmit that knowledge from your mind where it is
Mm,
so that the others can hear it. And we have to use language. So there's no way you can talk about knowledge without talking about language.
mm. And just to go back to our own indigenous knowledge systems, where um, Albert Einstein, for example, is acknowledged for being the smartest man because he is the one who said that time and space is not separate, but it's one, it's simultaneous. And funny enough, when you look at isiZulu, our indigenous language, time in isiZulu is iskati, and space in isiZulu is mkati. So already we acknowledge that millions of years before we had Einstein having to tell us about that, you know. So
We
already,
already knew.
yeah, we already knew about it, you know. So already you could see the value of, acknowledging our indigenous knowledge systems, you know. And then I read an article written by City Press, and they actually bring to light the importance of languages. And according to them, one language disappears every 2 weeks, which is quite sad to read. So, are there ways in which we can preserve our languages?
Definitely, there are ways in which we can preserve and bring back to life, not just preserve them, but bring them back to life, where it's not something that you think it's a special thing if someone talks about your indigenous language. It becomes the norm. And how do we do that? Like I said before, we start in the house. Parents should make their children proud of their identity, their African identity, their culture. And that is expressed through how you speak your own language. You have to speak your own language if you identify with your culture. And the sad thing is, nowadays you find many parents actually see it as a status symbol where they can say, my child doesn't speak their indigenous language, they can only speak English.
Mm,
And sadly, that is actually not a status symbol. English is just a tool that everyone needs to use nowadays to communicate and succeed in whatever they want to do. But it doesn't make you a success. So it doesn't shift you within a society where you can say, because I speak English fluently, I'm much better than a person who doesn't know how to speak English. That is not, you can't use that as a bar to compare two people, that one speaks English and the other one who doesn't speak English is lower than the one who speaks English. That doesn't work. Sadly, that's what we are now teaching our own children, even as they grow up, that if you speak English fluently and with an accent, you're better off than a child who doesn't speak English, but you'll find that's not a level of intelligence. That's
mm,
not a level of capability. It's just that you were able to learn a language.
mm,
And then you take it to the school, like I said before, where you give that same importance to the indigenous languages. And
mm.
in that way, our indigenous languages not only alive, but they thrive and they exist and they keep on growing because we are acknowledging them more and more.
And then, what then would be the fundamental cause of a death in a language?
It's westernization,
Mm,
westernization, where the Western things are the ones that make you who you are. That's how we see it nowadays. So if I'm able to imitate the Western world's culture, it means I'm a better person. And sadly, that's what is destroying our indigenization. We should have self pride in where we come from. We should have self pride in our ancestors, in our history, in our identity, in our language. Where if I want to sing a song, I should be able to sing it in my indigenous language on an international platform. And I should be able to get the same fame and acknowledgement just as if I sang the same song in English. So that's what needs to happen.
I think a better question to ask is then, how do we get to see the modern parents of now, even the modern young people of now, to even see that the value, to see the significance behind acknowledging our indigenous language? Because I mean, a parent would easily look down on our indigenous languages because English brings food to the table, you know. So how
Mm.
then do we go about approaching or enlightening the people of today to really um, appreciate our indigenous language?
I think that's the role of the country now. It's the powers that be, because if we start putting importance on our languages, starting from the higher level where we acknowledge the importance of our languages, and we reinforce that importance of our languages in the different sectors in society, it's actually a mind shift that needs to come about, where the reason why parents now believe that English is more important than the indigenous languages is because that is what is out there. So, what is out there has to be shifted. That mindset has to start with the government putting in place policies where it is a must that an indigenous language is given the same level of importance in the schools, the same exam requirements for you to pass English home language should be the same exam requirements for you to pass an indigenous language. And if putting that importance in those different sectors, mind shift happens, because now we are realizing that, oh, okay, even the indigenous language has the same importance as English home language. And then it will trickle down now to even parents who say, you need to know an indigenous language, because if you go to school and if you fail an indigenous language, you won't pass matric. That language we use for English, now we're using it for an indigenous language. Therefore, I'm going to make sure my child knows the indigenous language at home also, just like they have to know English. And in that way, we start shifting the mindset of even parents.
I see. And then I think the last question, just to close off the interview, would be adapt or be left behind. That's the whole concept of today's society.
Mm.
Many parents are encouraging their children from a young age to speak English rather than the indigenous language. What are your thoughts on this new way of thinking? I think it touches also on, is culture relative or stagnant? Bringing the whole idea of adapt or be left behind.
Culture is never stagnant. It can't be. Culture is evolving, culture is changing, culture should be growing, because culture is a people. And you'll find generations come with people who come up with different ways at looking at things. And if they do that within a culture, their culture, obviously it grows the culture. So there's no way you can ever say that culture is stagnant or culture is static. Culture shifts, culture grows, culture bends and tries to fit in with the changes that happen. If you look at our different cultures, we have we had a tradition of, if a woman's husband dies, it's a given. You don't even have to discuss it. She has to have a husband. And usually they even do it on the day after the funeral, where they sit down and discuss, and they've already decided this will be your new husband in all aspects of being a husband. But with the movement of time and the diseases that came along, like the AIDS pandemic, it shifted. But you see what happens. The core idea, the essence behind that tradition was the woman needs to be taken care of, the children needs to be taken care of within the family. If we tell her to go back to her home, most probably she'll take the children and we'll never see them again, or she'll marry another man and all those things. So they wanted to keep her within the family and take care of her. That was the essence of this tradition. Now with the pandemic, AIDS pandemic, they shifted. Okay, he will not be a husband in all those aspects, but the essence of it will be, we will give you a figurehead, a man within the family who you will turn to for assistance, for help. in terms of taking care of the family. So culture shifts, culture evolves, culture grows. It doesn't stay the same. And you'll find that African cultures, there was always a very, very, very real, well thought out reason for the different traditions that we have.
Mm. I think also speaking about culture being relative, I think we shouldn't make the mistake of it being relative to the Western kind of culture or
Mm,
civilization, because I think that's how things get lost in translation and certain things
yes,
get forgotten.
yes.
Mm.
That is very true because the traditions that we have, we came up with them on our own, in our own areas. Before even the Western, the colonizers came, we had those traditions already. And the change in them should have, like you're saying, should have nothing to do with Western influence, but looking at our traditions and deciding what is the best thing for us as a people,
Mm.
basing it on our traditions.
Mm. No, ma'am, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you've got a very busy schedule and you sacrificed at least 1 hour for the interview today. And I thank you for sparing us with your time today.
And I'd like to also thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this discussion. I
Mm.
feel very strongly about language because I
Mm.
believe language is vital. Language has an important role to play in any society, in the growth of any society. So bringing our indigenous languages back is very, very important. And the thing that really gets me is I look at you, you're the
Mm.
young generation, which most of the time thinks the Western world, the Western culture, the Western identity is the be all of a human being. So if you have that, that's it. And you are the young generation, and you're coming and you're saying, no, my identity, my African culture is just as important. So I do believe
Mm.
there's hope if we have your generation now having these serious conversations
Mm.
about a very serious topic.
No, funny enough, because um, we have there are museums in Europe, America that actually highlight the African culture. Some have the king's heads and the queen's heads in their museums, and clearly the white man was able to see the value of the African culture. And funny enough, the
True.
very same people who are the culture may not see the value, but the very same
Mm.
oppressor sees the value of our culture,
Yes.
even
You
in today's
see,
society.
very true.
Yeah.
Very true. Mm.
No, ma'am.
So
Yeah.
it's good that you're seeing the value.
Yeah. No, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Tabani. Thank you very much.